women at the University of Tokyo are athletic, more than men. Girl power, says Momoko. But she comes up with one more very important philosophical point. Perhaps, unconsciously of course, but the University of Tokyo Softball Association, maybe they're being sexist. Maybe they're being chauvinistic, male-centered. Maybe there are little rules to get more people to join the game. Maybe that's actually a hugely unjust rule. Reverse discrimination, perhaps it is. Let's hear from one other person who believes that the Softball Association is justified in doing so. You've heard from Shinichi, who says it's just a rule. A rule is just a rule. And you've also heard from Momoko. You heard what Momoko said. So,
I think in fourth swing case, the opposite enemy team of him will be unsatisfied in doing that. But in giving 2 points for the girl could make everyone rather make majority happy, because everyone wants girl and no matter where they are enemy or
Yuki draws upon utilitarianism. He says, more girls will make people happy. Go back to the very first case study that we looked at today. It's on page 1 of your sheet. And you'll see that two philosophies agree with that. Not just Aristotle, but utilitarians. Utilitarians say Anne will be the happiest if she receives the flute. And the Softball Association says more people will be happy if more girls from the University of Tokyo played softball. That too is a convincing argument. Yuki is right in making that claim. It's a very utilitarian claim. Now this is where Aristotle differs from utilitarianism. And this is the last thing where we end. We're going to go back once more to a very serious case. And it goes to politics. What did Aristotle think about politics? Aristotle believed in a form of politics very different from the politics that we're used to today. Now Japan is used to having, or used to not having, prime ministers. In the past 6 years, we've had 6 different prime ministers, have we not? Aristotle says this: the nature of politics is to go after the good life, civic virtue. This is what we need. What does Aristotle mean? Aristotle says everyone should be involved in the process of political decision making. Why? Recall that Aristotle says rocks fall to the ground because that's where they belong. Literally, this is where rocks come from. Fire shoots upwards towards the sky because look at the sun. That's where they belong. People should go where they belong. And Aristotle says what's different between a frog and a human being is that human beings have a capacity for language. Since human beings have the capacity for language, they have the capacity to talk about what's right and wrong, what's just and unjust, what's moral and amoral. Aristotle says the only way we can cultivate, the only way we can improve these abilities is if we actually engage in politics. Aristotle says, well, he didn't actually say this, this is what he would say. In order to become a good cook, you can't just read cookbooks, you have to actually try to cook. In order to become a good tennis player, you can't just read about tennis, you have to play tennis. So Aristotle says everyone should be involved in the political decision-making process. Well, just about it. to look at. The biggest controversy surrounding Aristotle is that he says slavery is okay. If you look at what he considers to be good governments and bad governments, he considers democracy to be a bad form of government. He says that's a rule by the poor. That's not true politics, says Aristotle. Why did Aristotle allow slavery? Aristotle allowed slavery because he thought, he came up with two reasons. The first reason, he says, was because slavery is necessary in order for people like him to talk about philosophy when he wakes up and when he goes to sleep. In order for him to be absorbed in philosophy, someone has to cultivate his crops. He says that some people need to be liberated from manual labor so that they can engage in political discourse, in political discussion and debate. The second reason he gives is that if people fit in a role, then it's okay. Teleological reasoning, says Aristotle. The purpose. Some people are born to be slaves. This is what Aristotle said. Aristotle admits that not all people are fit to be slaves. Athens always captured a certain amount of prisoners in wars. Aristotle says that's not a fit. If a slave tries to run away, there's coercion. And if there's coercion, if there's force, that's not a good fit. But if the slave doesn't try to run away, if he's doing manual labor, then it fits him. So, Aristotle's views of politics, of civic virtue, of good life, is a set with his justification of slavery. Now we come to the grand question, the big question of the day. Is Aristotle right in allowing for slavery so that the people, the polis, can pursue civic virtue, can pursue a form of politics where people can cultivate their conceptions of what's right and wrong, what's just and unjust? Aristotle says slaves who are fit to be slaves should be slaves. Philosophers who are fit to be philosophers should be philosophers. Let's take a poll. Raise your hand if you think Aristotle is justified in his vision of the ideal polis, the ideal society. And raise your hand. Okay, you've got a few. And raise your hand if you disagree with Aristotle in saying that's not the kind of society where we should be living. Okay? Let's hear first from a defender of